Are there any questions for any of the speakers from this morning? Yes.
Hi, in terms of sort of charging the batteries on the VD, how long do they take to charge, and can you charge them from the vehicle?
Yeah, they can be charged from a vehicle. There are vehicle mounted systems that Ego do, but you can actually put into the van to manage all the batteries that you use. Charge time's about 45-50 minutes, depending on which charger you use. Run times vary depending on how hard you work in the surface. We've had up to 2 hours, but we've had as low as an hour on 2 batteries, but depending on what you're doing.
Okay, gentleman here.
I ask, it might come across as a stupid question, so I apologise in advance. With the electric wheeling that you were talking about,
Yeah.
can that be used in the rain? Is it safe to be operated in the rain, or is it weather permitted?
It would be more weather permitting. It'd be more similar to glyphosate. You can use it with rain immediately after. It doesn't matter about that. But the plant needs to be relatively dry. And you can't use it, especially the hard surface machine. It's more important. You don't use it over puddles because you can create a short circuit essentially, where there's no resistance in the water, or very little resistance in the water. So yeah, it is a little bit more weather dependent than the other systems. The hot water and hot air, it doesn't matter what weather it is.
So would the other side of that be, is it ever sort of too dry to be trying it for like risk of spark or anything like that? Or?
I haven't come across a situation where it is. What I would advise doing though is blowing away very dry material, dry leaves and things like that. So that there is a sort of sweet spot in the middle, but you would have to worry a lot less on the dry side.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions actually. One is regarding the brushes. I presume they're plastic, the bits of the brush?
It depends.
Okay. Well, regarding the plastic ones, if you're on a highway or a meangy area or a park or in urban areas, you're going to be brushing near watercourses, culverts, bridges, drains. What happens to the end? Does they go into the watercourse and create a microplastic issue? That's probably a brown water question as well. Because they do wear down, I presume.
Yeah, but the inherently, where you're using a brush, you're as I said, you're reducing the amount of pollutants on the surface hugely, and what you're sweeping is ending up in the bucket. So the fragments of the brush should also end up in the bucket. It's not going to be 100%, but yeah, I would suggest you're going to have an awful lot less pollutants if you've swept than if you haven't.
And at the end of their life, can they be recycled if they're plastic?
I haven't really
Or they just
tried,
get binned?
to be honest. Yeah,
They can be, yeah. Most of them, like ours, are polypropylene.
Yeah.
They can go into the recycle stream, yeah. I mean, there's always a payoff with microplastics to a certain extent, but there is with your boots you're wearing. Your boots wear out, you walk around, you leave a microplastic rubber around as you're walking about in day-to-day life. So it's like Sean said, if you can sweep it up, collect it up, then yes.
I would think boots would last longer than...
yeah,
They still wear out. They still wear out.
Yeah, they do, yeah. And then the other question is going back to the electric system. We had a trial in Swansea, probably 5 or 6 years ago now. One of the questions that a lot of people raised at the time, we put in the voltage through the ground quite a long way. How does that affect the inverts, the worms, the fungi?
It doesn't. There's been studies on that now, and it is one of the least harmful things to microbials and worms and that kind of thing. Unless you touch the worm directly, it's not causing it a problem. So yeah, it's taking the easiest path back to earth, and it's not disturbing the soil where it can get away from it, basically.
Does that change with ground conditions then, if the ground is wetter or drier?
It changes a bit, yes. It's still the main way that it works is you've got on the positive and negative electrode, you've got 4,000 volts here, say, and 4,000 volts there, and it's always trying to balance either side. So if you've got something with a different voltage there, it's not going to try and be attracted to that and then back out. So it's interfering with very little. But yeah, they've done studies on the soil in the affected area, and they found that it's not affecting the soil microbials and other life in the soil, whereas pesticides will affect microbials to a certain degree, as will hot water potentially if you putting enough that it's going deep into the soil. Hot air generally won't, because it will bounce off the surface. So yeah, to a greater or lesser extent, but electricity is one of the less of those.
Lisa?
Can you just explain how, like with the root wave,
Yeah.
like you literally zap the weeds, don't you, with a prong? How
Yeah.
does the hard surface machine work?
So the hard surface machine, rather than having one, the negative electrode in the soil buried, and the positive electrode on the lance, it's got them close together on the machine. So the electricity is just passing, it's got two paddles with an insulating plate in between, and it's just passing from the positive to the negative in the machine.
So you literally just brush
So
over the weeds as you wheel it along.
yeah,
then?
so it's for weeds less than the distance of that, because you don't want to bridge the gap ideally. So up to about sort of 15-20 centimetres high, and you drive over and it'll be effective on that sort of size plant. It's more effective on less dense areas as well, because you've got to have contact with the plant there, and the thicker and more dense the vegetation is, the less contact it's going to have with certain parts of the vegetation. So it works very well in conjunction with the soil removal, and then having things to spot treat. It works, but works less well if you're trying to, blanket treat an area.
So if it's just like a moss or something really low growing, because
Yeah,
it's,
it'll work
fine,
effectively on moss. Yeah.
Okay, any further questions?
Yeah, regarding the electrical code, is there any kind of regulations or specific training or PPE?
There is
or
specific
anything
training in
like that?
PPE, yeah. I can't go into too much detail here, but essentially when you are operating the machine, you need to make sure you're wearing correct boots. So there's electrical safety boots that prevent current entering you or getting back to earth through you. And then there's lots of safety on the machines themselves to prevent the current transferring up to the operator. But each machine, when it's installed, has to be delivered with training on use. It's not a specific qualification you have to get, but you have to be trained in the safe use of the machine. And only certificated operators should be using it, and you get a refresher once a year.
Any more questions?
Yeah, I've got one for mine.
Yeah.
Mine's more of a general question. We work for Ethan Patalbed in Street Scene, and basically, as we currently speak, we've got to make savings of £400,000 for the next financial year. How do you envisage that we incorporate these new systems, which seem to be more labour intensive, when that's going to cost us more money across the board, when we can't supply the service we want to?
Yeah.
How are we going to get these new systems to work with less money?
I'm trying to work on that a lot. The shift is really that you're going to save a lot of money long term, but the problem is you've got a yearly budget. Once you've done the first year and removed, assuming you remove the build-up of soil that's been built up over the last couple of decades usually, then it becomes potentially cheaper over the next few. But that initial year or perhaps 2 to 3 years, if you're not able to target all at once, basically you can't chew it all off at once. What I suggest people do is you put in a 3-year phase-out plan. So I'd start now before everything tumbles further and further down the road and you've got less time restraints. I would focus on that soil removal first, get some machines in where you can tackle the worst affected areas of detritus and soil build-up, and perhaps carry on using pesticides for the rest of the weed management to begin with. Then the following year you can start buying some other kit that will replace some of that. In the places where you've reduced the soil, you can then use another machine a lot more efficiently, because you're starting at a place where you've not got a blanket of weeds this high. Timing of treatments is really important as well for cost. So if you're using heat, it's a lot more efficient and time effective to treat a plant that's this big, or heat will work on anything from a germinating seed up to a plant that big. But if it's a plant that big, you've got to cover a plant that big. So it takes a lot more time than if you're just passing over a small plant, and it takes a lot less energy to kill.
Isn't that the same as herbicide use though? If you're spraying something that's that size, it's
Well,
fractionally amount of herbicide to spray a weed that's that
Yes,
size.
it is, but typically we're not starting spraying until the middle of May. I might be wrong, Alan, perhaps I
Well,
can...
I mean, I think we're into a 12-month cycle now.
Really?
You know, well, nothing's stopping growing, is it?
No, well, I suppose it's not this year.
No, and it's been like that for a few years, but
A lot of the bottles talk about having an amount of foliage to be able to maximise the intake of the chemical, which kind of works. If you're used to applying it like that, it works opposite to the way we're kind of telling you to do it, which is as young as possible. I've heard of a few councils doing strim and spray, which definitely doesn't work.
no.
And will be a huge waste of chemical. I think, right, we'll clear the material because we need to make it look tidy, and then we'll spray it so it doesn't come back. But the spraying is ineffective because there's no foliage there to treat.
Just on the question of funding, it is obviously a very real issue, and it is one of the things we want to talk about in the workshops later on, just to gather ideas, because obviously Welsh Government is the source of a lot of local authority funding, and we don't have much money either. So it's, I think the question for today that we're particularly interested in is within the resources that we do have, what's the best thing that we can do with that? What's the best approach, given that there is this overarching driver to get the amount of pesticide that's being used and the frequency with which pesticides are being used reduced. So how can we be as efficient as possible within the limited resources that we've got? So that's for the discussion later on. The other question?
Yeah, I'm from Swansea City Council, and I run like a small team, hotspot lead team. But we've got two wards in Swansea, pretty much the same sort of thing with the funding that have opted out of the, because we use the complete weed spray Cardiff, and the amount of weeds now, they've opted out of the chemicals now, is you just can't keep on top of it. Like, and it's come to the point now where you've got to do a sort of fair deal that you can't be seen, because they've opted out of the weed spraying programme, you can't be seen to be going into that area as much as, otherwise you'd have all the councillors complaining that why aren't you coming to our area, and it is, without them, we've got 5 men. I know that there's another section in the Swansea City Council, the CWAT team, and they do a lot more than us because they've got a lot more men. But with the 5 people that we've got, because we're like highways, not cleansing, we're specific in certain areas, but it is it's to be able to try and get 5 people to do the whole of Swansea on certain areas, and then not use the weed spray. You just can't be seen. It's got to come to, it's like at the moment now we're doing like a cut-off point in the ward, but once you get like to 10 jobs, you've got to be seen as doing fair and not doing all the wards. We've got to sort of say, look, we can't a minute, and we've got to, because we've got to be seen to be doing an equal amount in each one. You chose to sort of opt out, if you know what I mean, but and we've got to it's not trying to force them to go back into the weed spray, but it's getting on. It's at certain areas in Swansea now are just getting in, really looking bad.
Definitely worth capturing that this afternoon. I was going to say this afternoon, it's not maybe slightly this afternoon, but later on this morning, when we go to the workshops, let's write that down so we can take that away and feed it back in. Okay, so it's now 20 past. A couple more questions at the back.
I just wanted to pick up on the last 2 comments really, is to see, are we getting a balanced objective here so we get the people that manufacture the glyphosate at the table and be present with us to have these conversations, because I feel there's a narrative against rather than working with. I'm all for the prevention rather than cure. However, are they at the table? Are they being encouraged to attend these events so that we are getting total balance of what can be done, even if we work with the new restrictions coming in? Because I dread to get to the point where it's a carte blanche ban because of the agri-world, where we can't use it, because I think we've got thousands of kilometres of footways to be using your types of machinery.
So
Can
this
we
is
get
one
them?
of the
And that's what
only
we-
events
because
that this is the
sorry,
case.
we-
In
we-
every other event,
Yeah.
for example, I was at the Community Forum conference the other day, almost every presentation is about, you know, the benefits of glyphosate and the studies that are showing the opposite of what we're saying. So the voice of that side is being represented, generally speaking, a lot heavier. It has a lot more money behind it than any of the
obviously,
voices
yeah.
you've heard today.
Yeah. But
You know,
for people like ourselves who are in that decision-making process within our local authorities, it'd be nice to get that balanced approach. The narrative used today is for your equipment. I'd like to hear the balance from the other side, or what are the benefits if we work together. I think Welsh Water touched upon it. It's us working as a group together, because I don't think we can completely go down that approach.
Okay, Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, is it not to look at like a risk base? Is that a place to start? Is risk based? So one thing that I was going to say, if anyone wants, I need flashed up a map there to show where our drinking water catchment areas are. But if anyone wants to know specifics, I can talk to you, or you can send me a map and I can show you where your local abstractions are. But looking, you know, at your areas, what is the highest risk places to target some of this to start it off, and accept some risk in other areas where there's lower risk to, well, from my point of view, water interaction.
I got to stress, I'm not against the
Just to
idea.
get that balance.
It's definitely the way we've got to aim
Yeah.
for, but it's getting that balance between the risk and the benefit then. Because I know, sorry for contradicting you, there are authorities in England who did ban glyphosate and returned.
Yes,
So
and the way they managed it was not this.
So what's
So the
going
way-
on in, as a complete picture?
So, absolutely fair point to make. Obviously, this event is looking at, you know, certain types of equipment. There are other events, and we are thinking about, you know, what other things that we will need to do. The other, I mean, we're also not saying that we want to move away entirely from glyphosate. Obviously, there's a decision I mentioned which HSE will be taking sometime in the course of 2025, which, you know, you can be sure that the glyphosate, the owners and the alliance of owners that promotes glyphosate will be making their representations as to why it is a relatively safe product to use compared to some of the others. That decision will happen. I think what I was trying to signal earlier is there is a trend towards, you know, less use of chemical pesticides and more use of alternatives. So that's one of the reasons for having this event. But we're not saying move away entirely from chemical pesticides. There are also precision applications. So part of the challenge has been in the past that people have tended to broadcast, you know, pretty much every square inch rather than targeting the application on the bits that are actually problematic, where the weeds are actually growing. Because glyphosate doesn't remain in the soil. It's one of its advantages. It also means there's no point in spraying it where there are no weeds, because it's not having any effect. So there's a balance there. I think that future events like this, potentially, we will be able to look at those kind of precision applicators. Lisa, did you want to?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, obviously there's been a lot of attention on glyphosate today because that's the chemical that most local authorities use. But I mean, we want to reduce all the pesticides, but I also do invasive non-native species policy, so I'm very aware of how important glyphosate is for Japanese knotweed, Himalayan balsam, hogweed, you know, so you know, it's not, we're not bashing glyphosate, we're just saying we want to reduce pesticides overall, and some of these machines can help people do that in certain circumstances. If you've got a massive stand of Japanese knotweed or Himalayan balsam, you know, your road sweeper suggest
Depends on the
isn't going to
tools.
be isn't going to be the right
Electric
machinery.
lamps, perhaps, but
Yeah. So yeah, it's about balance, and that's that's the key to integrated pest management. It's not necessarily about saying no pesticides. It's about saying what is the best way to control the weed in this situation.
Yes.
Just a small question, just to give it some context for the lady from Welsh Water. I'm sure there are many different things that you have to deal with to get into the water.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of percentage effort and budget comes to the pesticides that we're talking about? Is it like the poor cousin, or is it a big chunk?
Well, the grant funding that we had for the Pest Smart scheme was £1 million. So that's what we delivered for £1 million.
Yeah, and then the,
And then-
the remaining pot for everything else, is that 10 million, 100 million too?
I wish it was 100 million. That was slightly different because we got the grant funding for that. It's really difficult to say in total. I think our budget for the last AMP was around 20, but I think because of issues in the business has to prioritise other things, it kind of went down to about 7.
Sure.
So being able to access that grant really helped us. I wouldn't have got that £1 million from Welsh Water to do that work. It was the grant that allowed us to do it.
Sure. It was just to give some context in.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, it's difficult to say because we haven't had this. I don't know if anyone listened to the news this morning, but they were talking about Ofwat have made some announcements about, or making announcements about costs going forward. So, the water industry goes into 5-year business planning cycles, and we're in 5 of 5 now. So starts again in April, but we don't. I don't know. I shouldn't say too much because government people are really, but it doesn't really work because you don't find out early enough what we're not going to find out perhaps till January, what we've got for the starting in April for the next 5 years. So
Sure. Yeah.
it's not a perfect system.
And the £1 million, before you get excited, was European money.
Yeah, it was.
Which obviously we haven't got access
But
to.
what we tried to do was a lot of the materials is evergreen,
Yeah.
so a lot of that I think we can carry on using.
Yeah, oh definitely.
Unless
There's a
any policies
huge
change.
legacy from Pest Smart, even though it's finished. All that good work and
But yeah,
documentation is available.
I think a lot of it is people's time though. It's not necessarily having loads of money. It's about having a big enough team, which we don't really have at the minute, to come to all of these sorts of things, talk to you, understand where your risks are, understand where we can help. Could we give you maps of the catchment areas so you can think, okay, well, it's okay, perhaps I could do best practice by doing spraying over here because that's not really hydrologically connected to the river that's over here that's a drinking water. That sort of thing I think is what I'd quite like to do.
And £1 million doesn't go far these days.
But it's still cheaper than putting in treatment. So that's the method that we
so what's the treatment cost?
So GAC to install, when we did that about 10 years ago, it was 25 million.
So that's to remove some of the pesticides from the
Yeah, it
water.
does other things as well. It removes takes an odor compounds as well.
Yeah.
That's what we're looking at.
I'll take one more question, and then I think we do need to go outside while it stays dry and have a look at the equipment. But yes, sir.
So just to say again, do you know, so for the list of chemicals you gave,
Yeah.
so some of those are available to the domestic market that you can buy with no certifications or qualifications?
Yeah,
no training?
absolutely, yeah.
So-
Well, I was going to mention to Lisa actually, so when I was Googling to find out what was in the immunity, I could have bought some of them off Amazon myself. Just
Yeah.
that.
We are away, and we're trying.
Yeah, but the Immunity Forum's been trying to stop that for years now, to try and stop Amazon selling glyphosate or selectives, etc., etc. So, but I mean, the way to stop glyphosate being used willy-nilly is to spot treat every bit of hard surface that is available by spot treat, either with a knapsack or a machine, instead of people blanket spraying.
What was the other bit of your question?
No, that was it.
Oh, that was it.
I think what Kersten's getting at is that there's a lot of mistreatment, there's a lot of chemical that's not used correctly, and industry best practice isn't always the best.
So we are going to have to stop this discussion.